So right now the show is untitled. But before we started the show, I did a bunch of focus groups. And I asked women, what were they...
Breaking news. Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds are now facing a bombshell that they have desperately tried to keep hidden. A revelation that could dramatically shift the course of a lawsuit that has already captured Hollywood's attention. Tonight, it has emerged that there exists a recorded phone call, one that Sony never intended to surface, which could expose a significant falsehood at the heart of Lively's legal argument. According to sworn testimony from Justin Bolden's business partner, Jaime Heath, he secretly recorded a conversation with Sony executives, a call that was not just routine, but pivotal. During the call, Sony allegedly read aloud a letter supposedly drafted by Ryan Reynolds himself, demanding that Bolden and the Wayfarer team assume full responsibility for the disastrous PR campaign surrounding It Ends With Us. The implications are staggering. The so-called golden couple of Hollywood, long celebrated for their carefully curated public image, they have tried to force others to carry the burden of a crisis they themselves orchestrated, and now a tangible record of that manipulation exists. In response, Sony has reportedly filed emergency letters to the presiding judge, seeking to prevent the evidence from being unsealed, signaling the high stakes and the fear of public exposure. The questions raised are explosive. Were Sony executives aware they were being recorded? Did they knowingly misrepresent the events under oath? And did they admit, in private, that Blake and Ryan applied pressure behind the scenes? Legal experts note that a single recording contradicting sworn testimony could unravel the case entirely, especially if Lively's argument relies heavily on deleted messages, selective communications, and narrative spin. Furthermore, if the contents of Heath's recording do not align with Sony's official statements, it would constitute perjury at a federal level, potentially exposing all involved to serious legal consequences. Sources close to the depositions indicate that Sony executives were directly questioned about their involvement in the PR fallout, specifically whether Blake and Ryan pushed them to coerce Wayfarer into signing the "We Take All the Blame" letter that Ryan allegedly authored. With this recording now in play, the court will be able to hear the unvarnished truth, whether Sony admitted privately that Blake and Ryan were the architects of the chaos, and whether the so-called Reynolds power machine pressured Bolden to become the scapegoat for their own mishandling. If the tape proves what it appears to show, it could not only dismantle Lively's case but also permanently tarnish the carefully controlled public image the couple has spent years cultivating, turning a high-profile celebrity lawsuit into a cautionary tale about the consequences of manipulation, secrecy, and the fragile nature of reputation in Hollywood, or worse. Did Sony present one version of events in their depositions and a completely different story on the secretly recorded call? Because if those two accounts don't line up, Blake Lively's entire carefully constructed victim narrative could crumble in an instant. Let's be honest. People who are truly innocent in telling the truth don't try to bury evidence, delay unsealing orders, or insert themselves into hearings where they have no business. Yet that's exactly the pattern Blake's team has been following, raising serious questions about their strategy, their credibility, and just how far they're willing to go to protect their image. So pause for a moment and consider this. If Blake were genuinely confident, calm, and innocent, why is she running through courtrooms like she's desperately trying to put out a fire she herself ignited? The next chapter of this saga shows her legal team's growing desperation, culminating in a public courtroom embarrassment that revealed just how unprepared and reckless they've become. Imagine a packed courtroom filled with attorneys and parties involved in a lawsuit that has nothing to do with Blake Lively. This was the case between Stephanie Jones and Jennifer Alt, a completely separate legal battle. Suddenly, Blake's attorney, Kristen Bender, appeared uninvited, without standing, without reason, barging in, as if she belonged there. The judge, unsurprisingly, shut her down immediately, reportedly telling her, "This isn't your case. You don't get to speak." Bender had shown up ostensibly to support Stephanie Jones, a connection that will become more relevant later. But for the moment, the court made it crystal clear that Blake's presence was entirely inappropriate, and this wasn't an isolated incident. Just the previous week, Blake's team had filed a supplemental response to a motion entirely unrelated to them, prompting Wayfarer to remind the court once again that Blake's name wasn't even part of the dispute. This is what panic looks like. This is what desperation looks like. Blake's team is stepping into hearings where they don't belong, cluttering the docket, hurling baseless accusations, and hoping something, anything, will stick. But rather than portraying Blake as powerful or clever, it's making her appear frantic, unhinged, and increasingly detached from reality. And the chaos doesn't stop there. Next, the spotlight shifts to the tangled web of a mysterious website. Two women accusing each other of lying under oath, and Blake's apparent attempts to drag their conflict into her own struggling lawsuit. It's another layer of drama, one she seems determined to exploit to salvage a failing legal position, revealing the lengths to which the Reynolds Lively machine is willing to go to protect their reputation while navigating a rapidly spiraling legal nightmare. While Blake Lively's team is frantically crashing hearings they have no business attending, an entirely separate but equally explosive legal battle is unfolding, this one revolving around a mysterious smear website. Stephanie Jones is suing her former employee, Jennifer Al, alleging that Al helped create a website that publicly criticized Jones. In the middle of this legal tangle are two women, Catherine Casey and Melissa Nathan, whose testimonies directly contradict one another. Katie Casey insists, under oath, that she worked on the website, wrote the copy, and did so because Melissa Nathan instructed her. Melissa Nathan, however, denies this entirely, swearing under oath that she never gave Katie any instructions and that Katie's claims are false. Clearly, only one of these women can be telling the truth, which raises the specter of perjury, a serious legal matter that could have ramifications far beyond their individual conflict. Normally, this drama would have nothing to do with Blake Lively, but where most people see chaos, Blake sees opportunity. She appears intent on dragging this entire conflict into her own lawsuit, aiming to use it to attack Melissa Nathan, the PR expert who worked with Bolden and the Wayfarer team. The strategy is straightforward. If desperate, if Blake can paint Melissa as a deceitful, shady operator in another case, she hopes to convince the judge that Melissa acted in similar ways in her own matter, thereby bolstering Blake's position. It is a bold, high-risk maneuver, and even Wayfarer had to step in to remind the court that Blake Lively was attempting to weaponize an unrelated lawsuit to salvage her own crumbling case. The desperation is obvious, her credibility is slipping, her evidence is weakening, and she needs new villains quickly. But the deeper layer of this web reveals that neither Melissa nor Blake is the true architect of the smear campaign. The real puppet master is someone far more powerful, someone Blake seems unaware of, and she is now stepping into a political and legal firestorm that is far bigger than she imagined. The story behind the website, which Stephanie Jones claims destroyed her reputation, is far more complex than it appears. Katie Casey may claim Melissa instructed her, and Melissa may vehemently deny it, but the underlying truth involves Scooter Braun, the music mogul famously feuding with Taylor Swift, a PR powerhouse with immense resources and a network few dare to cross. Industry insiders report that Stephanie Jones was once Braun's personal PR client and allegedly engaged in controversial online campaigns on his behalf, including efforts against Swift. When Braun discovered this activity, he severed ties with Jones, established his own PR firm, and installed Melissa Nathan as president, cementing her role as a significant player in a larger high-stakes PR operation. Blake, it seems, has inadvertently inserted herself into a complex battle involving some of Hollywood's most influential figures, unaware of the power dynamics she is now navigating, and the consequences of misjudging them could be catastrophic. To put it bluntly, Stephanie Jones didn't just lose a client, she lost the client. A loss that has triggered a cascade of legal and reputational chaos, and the infamous website at the center of her lawsuit. According to sources who have followed the case closely, it was never truly about Justin Bolden or the Wayfarer team at all. The conflict was rooted in Scooter Braun's efforts to settle old scores, with Stephanie scrambling to reclaim relevance in a cutthroat industry where past mistakes can be fatal. But the situation escalates further because Blake Lively, in her frantic attempt to smear Melissa Nathan and salvage her rapidly collapsing lawsuit, has unwittingly thrust herself into Braun's high-stakes power game. Blake may be used to intimidating PR teams, actors, and even studios, but Scooter Braun is a different kind of force, a media and industry heavyweight, with enormous influence and zero tolerance for missteps. Meanwhile, the lawsuit itself is exposing skeletons Blake and Ryan Reynolds clearly hoped would remain buried. As Blake tries to frame herself as a victim in the Bolden case, analysts and online observers are highlighting a concerning pattern of behavior. Justin Bolden's business partner Hime Heatherman Blake accused of staring at her while she pumped his black, as are his wife and family. Yet Blake demanded access to their childbirth video as part of discovery. Yes, you read that correctly. A white actress involved in a PR dispute sought to obtain intimate footage of a black woman giving birth. In any courtroom, such a request is almost certain to raise eyebrows and could be interpreted as deeply inappropriate or even discriminatory, significantly undermining her credibility. And it does not end there. The unsealed depositions have reignited attention to past controversies that Blake and Ryan had hoped the public would forget, including their plantation-themed wedding. Images and discussions of the event have resurfaced. The cabin photos, dining tables set in front of former slave quarters, Pinterest-inspired aesthetics, and a public apology that felt more like calculated PR damage control than genuine remorse. Observers are drawing connections and seeing patterns. A plantation wedding, racially insensitive behavior, targeting a black man, and demanding access to his wife's childbirth video. These incidents together paint a troubling narrative. Even major media outlets have revived quotes from Ryan Reynolds admitting that marrying on a plantation was a giant mistake, before quickly returning to Hollywood as if nothing had happened. What Blake never anticipated, and what her legal team apparently failed to foresee, is that her past actions and public image could be used as character evidence against her in this case, jeopardizing her credibility at the most critical moment. Adding to the complexity is the piece of evidence Blake has been framing as her dramatic courtroom ace, the signal messages. Her attorneys have presented these messages as proof of conspiracy, cover-ups, and coordinated smear campaigns. claiming they demonstrate deliberate wrongdoing by Wayfair. According to Blake, these messages were intentionally deleted, which she argues implicates everyone at Wayfair in wrongdoing. Yet this strategy, while dramatic, may backfire, highlighting not her innocence but her desperation and willingness to stretch narratives to their limits. In essence, every element of this unfolding drama, from the signal messages to the resurfacing of past controversies, is converging to portray a high-profile legal battle where Blake Lively's carefully managed image, her credibility, and her legal position are all increasingly at risk, illustrating how a combination of ambition, miscalculation, and public scrutiny can transform a single lawsuit into a full-blown reputational crisis. There's only one problem for Blake Lively. Every tech expert, every legal analyst, and every witness who has testified in the case has said the same thing. There is no evidence of intentional deletion, and nothing in the messages suggests any wrongdoing. Yet Blake continues to insist that because some participants used Signal's auto-delete feature, they must be guilty of some covert scheme. The irony is staggering. Even Jennifer Owl, a witness Blake is leaning on heavily, testified that she only began using Signal because Stephanie Jones instructed her to. Yes, the same Stephanie Jones who is now secretly aligning herself with Blake in what is becoming one of the most unexpected alliances in Hollywood legal history. While Blake is frantically trying to weaponize these messages as proof of a conspiracy, everyone else is pointing out the obvious. Why would anyone in a casual group chat have preserved every single message, especially before Blake decided to sue them? Why would anyone anticipate that Blake, who was actively spreading negative stories, would later accuse them of orchestrating a smear campaign? Blake's argument, at its core, is built entirely on air, invisible evidence, and fantasy, and the depositions reflect this failure. Witness after witness repeatedly delivers the phrase Blake most fears, "I don't recall." It is, legally, the correct and truthful answer, but for Blake, it's a devastating blow. She expected a smoking gun, a piece of evidence that would vindicate her, but instead all she has is smoke from her own fire. And nothing demonstrates Blake's desperation more clearly than the alliance she has now forged with Stephanie Jones, one of Hollywood's most notorious and controversial PR figures. This partnership is revealing in ways that no courtroom filing ever could. Blake didn't stumble into the Stephanie Jones lawsuit by accident. She didn't randomly appear at hearings she wasn't invited to, nor did she spontaneously develop an interest in a completely unrelated PR battle. No. Blake Lively is actively working with Stephanie Jones. And if you understand Stephanie Jones's history, this collaboration tells you everything you need to know about Blake's motives. Stephanie is infamous in the industry for using threats, lawsuits, intimidation, and behind-the-scenes smear tactics to silence anyone who crosses her path. A PR version of a bull in a china shop, where the china consists of her clients' reputations and the lawsuits they inevitably become embroiled in. Business Insider once reported on Stephanie after interviewing 40 sources, all describing a pattern of bullying, manipulation, and coercion. And now Blake, the self-proclaimed victim of a smear campaign, is teaming up with someone with an identical playbook. Why? Because Blake needs a villain, someone to blame. She needs a target to point at and say, "It wasn't me, it was them." She is desperately attempting to drag Stephanie's personal war into her own lawsuit, trying to use it to imply that Wayfair and Bolden are guilty by association. But the reality is stark. Stephanie's conflict has nothing to do with Bolden, nothing to do with Wayfair, and nothing to do with Blake's fragile celebrity image. This is Stephanie's personal battle, mostly against Scooter Braun. And Blake is willingly stepping onto someone else's battlefield, brandishing a flag that isn't hers, and hoping no one notices how messy, hypocritical, and performative the whole endeavor looks. The court noticed, the judge noticed, and the public is definitely noticing. Every misstep, every opportunistic maneuver, and every desperate attempt to redirect blame is only amplifying the scrutiny Blake has long sought to control. And now, we're reaching the final domino in this unfolding drama. Blake's crumbling strategy is pushing her toward the very outcome she has tried to avoid for so long, going to trial under oath, with her lies, and desperate tactics laid bare for the judge, jury, and public to see. This is the moment Blake Lively had hoped would never come. The culmination of miscalculations, risky alliances, and the unstoppable weight of her own actions finally catching up to her. Now we reach the point where every thread of Blake Lively's collapsing legal strategy converges toward one inevitable and terrifying outcome: a full trial under oath, in front of a jury, with cameras rolling and the world watching every detail unfold. This is the scenario Blake dreads above all else. Why? Because a trial strips away the curated image, the polished PR statements, and the narrative control she and Ryan Reynolds have meticulously maintained for years. It is the moment when everything she has worked to bury, distort, or distract from becomes permanent public record. The Sony recording, which could prove she and Ryan orchestrated a false narrative to shift blame onto Justin Bolden and the Wayfarer team, would finally see the light of day. The plantation wedding photos, once carefully hidden or spun as tasteful aesthetics, resurfaced at precisely the moment when they are most damaging. The accusations of racial insensitivity toward Jaime Heath, including her unprecedented demand to access a black woman's childbirth video, would no longer be a whisper behind closed doors but documented in sworn testimony. Her bizarre attempt to hijack the Stephanie Jones lawsuit, the repeated uninvited courtroom appearances, the so-called smoking gun signal messages that ultimately show nothing but have been framed as proof of a conspiracy. All of these missteps would be exposed, and perhaps most concerning for Blake, her collaboration with Stephanie Jones, a PR powerhouse infamous for intimidation, smear campaigns, and ruthless tactics, would be laid bare for a jury to see, revealing the lengths she is willing to go to manipulate perception and weaponize others' conflicts to defend herself. The stakes escalate further because Blake will be forced to testify on the stand herself, fully under oath, with cross-examination looming and no control over the narrative. This is not a carefully staged magazine interview or a perfectly timed Instagram post. This is not Ryan Reynolds standing beside her, smiling for the cameras, presenting an image of calm perfection. This is the courtroom, the place where contradictions matter, where lies are exposed, and where patterns of behavior, recorded messages, and documented interactions cannot be glossed over. Meanwhile, Justin Bolden enters the courtroom armed with consistent testimony, verifiable evidence, and a legal team operating entirely within the rules, without the need to crash unrelated hearings or manipulate procedural loopholes. The contrast between a party presenting the truth and a party scrambling to hide it could not be more stark. Every move Blake makes is now under scrutiny, and every misstep magnifies her vulnerability. Layer onto this the media's role, and the pressure becomes almost unbearable. Once legal documents are unsealed, the story stops being a private legal matter and transforms into a cultural reckoning. For the first time in years, Blake and Ryan are no longer controlling the headlines, setting the tone, or curating the story to their advantage. Journalists are openly questioning motives, resurfacing past controversies, and analyzing inconsistencies in her claims. The Sony recording is being dissected in articles. Her attempts to manipulate public perception are under the microscope, and her repeated efforts to insert herself into unrelated lawsuits are being highlighted as opportunistic and desperate. Every unsealed document chips away at the carefully constructed image of Hollywood's golden couple, exposing patterns of panic, blame-shifting, and manipulative behavior. The emerging patterns are undeniable. Blake panicking every time evidence is unsealed, Ryan involved in the blame-shifting letter, Blake aligning herself with Stephanie Jones, Hollywood's most distrusted PR operative. If they're demanding private videos from a black family, showing up uninvited to hearings, pushing claims that collapse under scrutiny, and creating chaos only to claim victimhood afterward. Meanwhile, Justin Bolden's filings continue to hold strong. His evidence withstands examination, his procedural victories accumulate, and his credibility remains rock solid in contrast to Blake's increasingly erratic maneuvers. The public is noticing. The narrative is shifting. The truth is slowly breaking through, and the closer this case moves toward trial, the clearer the distinction becomes between someone defending themselves with facts and someone scrambling to survive with fear and theatrics. As trial looms, the stakes are enormous. Every miscalculation, every desperate tactic, and every public misstep will be permanently recorded, leaving Blake and Ryan with no ability to spin, stage, or control perception. The Sony tape, the unsealed messages, the resurfaced wedding photos, and the ongoing alliances and conflicts form a powder keg of legal and cultural consequences. For those following this drama, the coming trial represents a turning point, the moment when all of Blake's strategies collide with reality, and the outcome will determine not only the fate of the lawsuit, but the durability of a carefully curated celebrity image that is rapidly unraveling. The next chapter promises explosive revelations, with courtroom testimony, new filings, and public scrutiny converging to expose the truth in a way that Blake and Ryan have spent years trying to avoid.